My name is Elle Hale, and I'm the Vice Chair of Women United, stepping in today for our Chair, Kim Brenner-Zirkle. We're excited to see so many Women United members and guests this morning for a lifelong learning breakfast on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a fantastic panel of women to speak on the importance and application of this topic this morning. We'd also like to welcome our virtual guests who are watching from home. So before I dive in, I just want to share a few quick housekeeping tips or reminders for our virtual guests. All attendees are muted and your video is off. So if you have a question for our panelists, please use the chat feature on Zoom so we can recognize you. And the Zoom webinar today is being recorded, and we will share the recording in the communication following today's event. So I would like to start off this morning by saying thank you to our 2022 Women United sponsors for their generous support, our series sponsor, Wellspan Health, and our supporting sponsors, youve, OSS Health, and People's Bank, a Cadorus Valley company. Round of applause. All right, so we are going to get started today by introducing Kim Brister of Wellspan Health for some brief remarks.
Good morning, everybody. Really excited to be here with everyone today. I'm always just a little vertically challenged, so I'm going to move that down just a little. So once again, I'm Kim Brister. I am the Vice President, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Wellspan. Yes, that is a mouthful. And I am excited and thrilled to be here today with each of you. You know, for those of you who don't know, Wellspan's vision is to reimagine healthcare through the delivery of comprehensive, equitable health. And as an integrated delivery system focused on leading value-based care, we encompass nearly 1,900 employed providers across 220 locations. And we have 8 award-winning hospitals and a home care and behavioral health organization. Recently, our organization was recognized by Becker Health as a top destination for employment of its top 150 places to work in healthcare. Wellspan has over 20,000 employees, and I've watched that organization grow. I've been with Wellspan for about 16 years, and when I came back 16 years ago, we were about 6,000 strong. So to see it grow to 20,000 has been absolutely amazing and rewarding. And we are across 3 regions with a workforce of 81% female and 7% diverse across racial demographics. Additionally, and I talked about this when I was at the last Women United event, that we have 45% of our executives are women, and 3 in each of our regions are led by women. So, you know, girl power, right? We feel that our women leaders bring different perspectives and innovative ideas that lead to better decision-making overall for our health system. And the door is always open for women aspiring to be leaders at Wellspan. Remember, you know, one of the top 150, so anybody, you know, looking to make a transition, please look at Wellspan for an opportunity for that. But lastly, at Wellspan, we believe providing exceptional care for all begins with an organization which understands and celebrates all the uniqueness and similarities that each of us bring to the table. And engaging in an event like today really gives us an opportunity to strengthen that work and enables us to be partners with each of you in creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive, not only culture within our organization, but within our communities. So I'm really excited to be here representing Wellspan. I'm excited to be on the panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Now, before we dive into our panel discussion, I would like to welcome Daisha Alarza of United Way of York County to the podium to share an update on how United Way is integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion in their work. Daisha.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Elle. My name is Daisha Alarza. I am the Community Impact and DEI Coordinator with the United Way of York County. So I am excited to be joining this group of amazing women this morning. Thank you all for having me. So this morning, I wanted to share some of the ways the United Way of York County is moving towards a more equitable One York community. So each year, we go through an allocations process to ensure that the donations that we are entrusted with go to the programs in our community that are creating impact. And following our strategic plan to advance DEI work in the community, we added new demographic information to our allocations application, as well as we added 4 new narrative questions to our allocations application. So under demographic information, we added, for gender, we added a non-binary option, and for race, we added a multiracial and biracial option. So those were small changes we made, as well as the 4 new narrative questions. So while we were happy to hear that so many of our programs have started the DEI journey, we did realize that some of our programs still needed to start. We realized that DEI work is a journey and a spectrum for our partner agencies, and we want to meet them where they are and provide support to them. We found that just asking the questions in the process sparked conversation surrounding DEI. Listening led to engagement, which led to action. So 2 of the programs have already reached out to some of our board members. One is Kim Brister, and 2 additional programs have already reached out to myself and our other workers in the United Way, just for support and just really to ask for help to how to start the journey. So again, we provided support. We provided information on consultants and just provided information on what other people in the community are doing surrounding DEI work. So my takeaway is that sometimes just the openness to start the conversation is the catalyst that people need to feel invested in driving their own change. Within the United Way, we started our organization's work on our impact processes, and we will continue that work within our impact department. And next, we will be focusing on our intentionality around our development team. So we acknowledge that DEI work is a journey, and we will continue to ensure that DEI is interwoven within everything the United Way of York County does. We also want to continue working towards a more equitable One York community. So before I go, I did want to leave you all with a quote from Maya Angelou. "We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty." Thank you all for having me, and thank you all for joining us to embrace the change.
Thank you, Daisha, and thank you to the United Way for all the hard work you're doing with regard to DEI. And now, what we've all been waiting for, allow me to introduce our panelists. I'll share a little bit about each of their backgrounds, and then we'll transition over to our setup here and dive right in. So Kim Brister is Vice President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Wellspan Health, where she leads the organizational strategy to build a diverse workforce and advance an inclusive workplace. Kim earned an MBA from the University of Phoenix and holds a Diversity and Inclusion Certificate from Cornell University. For this work, Kim was recently honored with the Central Penn Business Journal's Women of Influence 2021 Award. I gotta give you a round of applause for that. Very nice. And that was, Power 30 for Healthcare List, and she received the Diversity Impact Award, one of the annual Spirit of Yoko Awards from the York County Economic Alliance. That's awesome, too. All right. And next, Ms. Anika Jackson is Family First Health's Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Anika earned her Master of Science degree in Public Relations from the S.I. Newhouse School at Syracuse University, her Bachelor of Arts degree in Corporate and Broadcast Communications from Elon University, and her Diversity and Inclusion Certificate from Cornell University. Anika lives in York, Pennsylvania with her husband and son. All right, very nice. And last but not least, Amy Bittner has worked at the Lancaster County Youth Intervention Center in case management since 2002, focusing on the needs of adjudicated delinquent and dependent youth and staff development. She's also an adjunct lecturer at your college in the Department of Behavioral Sciences and Education, teaching Introduction to Sociology, Criminology, and Ethnic and Minority Relations. All right, ladies, come on over. Okay. So we'll start off, let's see, maybe with an easy question. How do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion? What exactly do you mean when you say DEI? And let's start with Amy, and we'll just work our way this way.
So my positions don't have DEI in my title. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
This one.
This one. Okay. Sorry, I'm nervous. So in my positions as a case manager at the Youth Intervention Center and a lecturer at York College, I don't have direct influence as far as DEI in our initiatives. So, but it is something that we have talked about. To me, DEI is more than programs, trainings, and policies. It's something that we should, include in the culture of our organizations through the language that we use and other cultural universals. It should be more than just a checklist. It should be something that we're working toward. So again, my background is different than the other ladies on the panel. But when I think of DEI, I think mostly about representation. Mm-hmm. Of diverse groups, including not just gender, but race and ability, sexual orientation, ability, something that we've been talking about a lot lately, your citizenship or immigration status as well. So incorporating all of those things and having proper representation and also equity and assuring outcomes and opportunities for everybody. So that's what I think of when I think of DEI.
Awesome. Hope we're taking notes.
I would echo much of what Amy has shared, but I think, when we talk about diversity, it's easy to talk about what I consider the easy things: race, ethnicity, language, gender, sexual orientation. Those are things, like you referenced, can be check boxes, but really what all that brings us is a diversity of perspective. And so when we talk about diversity, yes, it's all those things, but then that brings us diversity of perspective. And then when you build onto that in terms of equity, it's meeting people where they are based on their journey, their perspectives, and really supporting them to be able to thrive. And people might start from different places in their journey. One's not better than the other, it's just different. And then when we talk about inclusion, it's how do we make sure that everybody feels valued in that, in the collective. Not, we recently had a training where we talked about mainstream and margin. We don't want people on the margin. There are always people on the margin. And so how do we seek out those people on the margin and bring them in so that they become a part of the collective? So I kind of mushed it all there together, but they build for me, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Excellent. Kim?
Well, I could add just a little, but before I do that, I just want to take a moment and just acknowledge and recognize what took place on Saturday in Buffalo. It was a horrific act of violence and racism, and I think it's important to call that out. I think it's important to hold space to just honor and recognize those lives lost. And as a DEI professional, I was reading on LinkedIn yesterday, and actually it caught my eye because I think Mainika Ojo actually acknowledged the fact that there was a young woman who, it was her grandmother that lost her life, and she was a DEI professional, and she was just so angry and frustrated with all the work that we do in this space, but yet, her work, she felt, was in vain. Mm-hmm. Because her grandmother was taken in a split second because of race. So I need to acknowledge that as a DEI professional myself. So when I think about DEI, much of what each of them said, I think about, diversity as who we are. What does your organization look like? What's the demographic makeup of your organization? And then when you think about equity, I say, do you have equitable policies in place that really enables that diverse population of folks to be able to live out their dreams and be able to achieve their goals and their aspirations. And once again, meeting them where they are by what they need and not what you think they need, including them in the conversation when you're looking to establish policies and procedures, that you're actually bringing them into those discussions. Because without it, really you're creating systems and programs that may not positively impact them. So it's also having that equitable discussion and bringing them in. And then when you think about inclusion, it's really being able to elevate those voices to the point that they really feel that they have an opportunity to share and contribute to what it is that you're trying to achieve as an organization. And I'm going to take it one step further and talk about belonging. Because, you can elevate your voice, but are you really being heard? Do you see that your opinions are being taken into account as you are giving these ideas and these perceptions to your teams? Every day we can sit and we can, I always say I feel like I have a voice at the table, but does my voice really matter? Because when you really, really bring all of those three together and create this space of belonging where people really feel they contribute, that's where you get that DEI nirvana where everybody's firing on all cylinders. My really good days, I talk about firing on all cylinders where, everything's just kind of aligning. I really feel like I'm making a difference. We want all of our team members, and honestly, those in our community help us thrive, to feel as though they have something to offer and that their voice is truly something that is heard. So, when I think about DEI, I think about that as a collective as well.
Awesome. And on that note, we're done. I'm kidding.
Okay.
Kim just took it way up here. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. So next up, I want to ask, what has influenced your thinking around DEI and motivated you to get involved in being an advocate for change? I'm going to throw this one to Anika.
So I'll tell you, my professional journey did not start with DEI. And so, our life experiences really push us and propel us, I believe. And so for me, seeing through my life journey, as I talked about earlier, the people on the margin, and recognizing that we all have something to offer. And we've all had those experiences where we felt like our voice wasn't heard. And so when you walk your life journey and you start to see that, for me, it was, wow, but if I take the time to talk to this one person and they offer a totally different perspective that might change my mind about something, how amazing is that? And so personally, that is what's motivated me to get on this DEI journey professionally, recognizing that everybody has something to offer. And I have had many experiences where I've talked with someone who has a different perspective. It might be that they look just like me, or they come from a similar place as me, but their perspective is different because their life experience is different. And so for me, that's what's really influenced and motivated me to want to get into this work, recognizing that people come from different places. And I have had personally many experiences where I've been enlightened, I've been further educated, and I've been inspired by people who come from a different place than me. And so, I'm constantly in this journey professionally seeking out those different perspectives. When we feel so confident in our perspective, I'm looking for that other perspective to say, is this the right thing? To Kim's point about, we can sit in a room as organizations and make decisions about what the community needs. And particularly from a healthcare perspective, we can look at the data and say, oh, this community needs this, and so we're going to put in this program. Well, maybe if we talk to that community, that's not what's most important to them. And so we have to really, tying back to that first question, bring people to the table who are going to be impacted by the decisions.
Excellent. I'm going to throw this question out to all of you just to lead into our third question. How long have you been here in York County?
I was born and raised in York County.
Anika?
I've been in York close to 20 years.
Okay. And Amy?
I was born and raised in Hanover, but still York County, and living in the city for almost 20 years.
Okay, awesome. So how far along has the DEI, or how far along the DEI journey do you feel York County is? And what are the barriers? We're going to start with Amy.
I feel like York County is a little bit of all over the place. But as Anika and Kim, mentioned, the need to meet people where they are. You're going to meet people further along on the journey. And as Anika said, you're going to meet, once you feel like you've mastered it, and I don't think any of us feel that we have mastered it, you're going to come across a different perspective and realize, do some interrogation of your own perspectives and thoughts and where those things come from. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to hop to Kim, and then we'll come to you, Anika. Same question.
Yes. So York County, once again, born and raised in York County. I think we have a long way to go. And, I say that, very openly, simply because, when we think about the demographics, simply the demographics of the communities in which we live, it's an area where there's not a lot of diversity. So, individuals can go their whole lives. I remember working with a young lady, and we were in our 20s. She was 23 years old, and she was completely terrified of me because of what her father told her I was, what I was. And of course, none of the descriptives that he gave me were very positive. And I thought, this dude hasn't even met me yet. But, reality was that she had no other point of reference. And I think that still exists. She had no diversity in her communities or in her inner circle, and therefore that really limited her ability. And Anika talked about that. Limited that ability to be able to connect with others that were different from them. And I think that still exists. I mean, we still see instances and situations and scenarios where there's definitely bad behavior. Quite frankly, racist behavior that takes place. And until we really recognize that, we as a country, as a community, that we have the ability to own and acknowledge where our challenges are, face them, and then really search within ourselves to connect with others who are different from us and really respect and honor those differences like you. I love having people who are different from me in my circle. My circle is very, very diverse. And, I challenged our folks at Wellspan. I said, look in your circle. Look at the people who you spend the majority of your time with. And if they all look like you need to find a couple of friends who don't. And really just expand and give yourselves an opportunity and permission to think beyond what you are normally enduring. And I think that's part of the challenge, is just being able to really embrace others that are different from us. And I think that, like I said, based on where you live, it's really easy to be stuck in what's comfortable. And therefore, also challenging yourself to be just a little bit uncomfortable is important. So I think we have quite a bit of work to do.
Anika.
I was actually asked this question yesterday in a meeting.
So you're prepared, all right.
Yeah, I wrote down my answer. And my answer yesterday is going to be my answer today. That York is trying. I believe that there are various circles popping up where there are groups of people who are curious. I do think that the murder of George Floyd really propelled certain organizations or certain groups to take a closer look at, wow, could that happen in our community? And so I would say there are pockets of York that are really trying hard. There are organizations that are really trying hard. And I also agree with Kim. We are recognizing in that journey of learning that we have a ways to go. So I'm going to choose the word trying. That's where I feel we are. We're trying. And I would encourage anybody here, anybody on the live stream, to really look inside yourself, because we can look at a collective journey, which is important, but even more important than that is our personal journeys. And so to Kim's suggestion to her team about look in your circles, Look at those people of influence in your lives. What do they look like? Where do they come from? What have their experiences been? And start there.
Excellent. Okay, so thinking about benefits and consequences of DEI, let's see, we'll start with how has DEI impacted your company? Let's go to, well, Kim, we'll start with you.
Sure. So, like I said, I started at Wellspan 16 years ago. It was my second time working for Wellspan. And one of the first things that I asked when I came back, and I started back there as a recruiter, but one of the first things that I asked was, do y'all do any type of diversity training? And the answer was yes. Back then it was diversity, and then it progressed to diversity and inclusion. Now it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging. But, the journey back then was diversity. So, the answer was yes. And, so I inquired with my immediate supervisor at the time, could I get involved? And once again, so that really began my journey there at Wellspan. But I would have to say that, 16 years ago, it was more of a passive journey. It was diversity training. We had diversity training for staff and diversity training for managers. It was used as a disciplinary tool. So if you demonstrated that you really did not embrace diversity, you got sent to diversity training, which really isn't what you want. I mean, that's not the whole goal here. So I would have to say it, and I completely commend our new CEO, and she's not so new any longer, but back in 2019, we hired Dr. Roxana Gapster as our first female leader. And immediately she said, DEI needs to be a priority. And that completely shifted our work and our journey. And I would say in a very short window of time, we went from it being passive to being very intentional, and starting really at the top, and I will say that Dr. Gapster said to me, she said, just so you know, I'll either walk in front of you or behind you, but I am with you in this journey. And that is the kind of leadership that you need. There's no ifs, ands, or buts that our CEO is a champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And therefore, holding us, accountable as an organization. So, Deloitte has a model, a DEI model, that kind of says, where are you on your stage, in your stage in your DEI journey. And I can tell you that I think only like 12% of companies ever reach like the fourth stage, right, Monica? It's only 12. We're still in 2. I mean, but recognizing 3 years in, this work isn't something that happens overnight. And if you're trying to do it right, you're not just checking boxes. You're really trying to do a culture change and shift. And that takes many, many, many years. So while we are in our infancy, and we are making significant headway, we still have a long way to go. But so does every organization who's really trying to make a culture shift and change.
Awesome. Kim just spoke. Amy, same question. How has DEI impacted your company?
No, I started with the Lancaster County Youth Intervention Center right after undergrad. And my undergrad background is sociology and criminology. And you can take all the stats courses and theory courses, but once you see the disparities playing out in real time with real children. And I think that made such an impact on me, seeing the disparities, and not just in outcomes of juvenile justice, but the amount of kids that we had in my center, who is over-policed, what communities they are coming from, who is underrepresented by legal representation, things, and actually seeing that play out, I'm like, are we all seeing this, and what are we doing about it? So it's that part where you can't unsee it. And juvenile justice has taken a lot of initiatives. The big push right now is trauma-informed care. But what I love is that they're also looking at generational and racial trauma over the years and how that is still having an impact on all of these outcomes in juvenile justice. As far as on the college level, going in as an adjunct in 2015, I thought that higher ed was immune from issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like statistics show that the smarter you are, the less racial attitudes you have. And I was like, wow, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening here. York College is still a very white institution. We do have a Black president, President Gunter Smith, but most of our faculty and a lot of our students are white. So we have issues, matters of recruitment of students and of faculty as well. And we have so many great programs, YCOSP, the York College Community Opportunities Program with a great director, Rita Trippett. But we have a plethora of amazing, talented students from York City. And it's amazing when they come to the campus and they get excellent scholarship packages, and then they come to our campus and they don't feel represented. They don't see people who look like them. And that's something I think we are trying. We acknowledge that it's an issue, and we're really, working for it. I did sit on a search committee over the summer for our director of student diversity and inclusion, and that was they asked the old white lady to be on this search committee. I was like, okay, I will be there. I'm so humbled and excited. I'm always humbled and excited. But again, we are trying. One of my cohort members is working at the Gettysburg's Garthwaite Leadership Center in Gettysburg at Gettysburg College, trying to recruit students and faculty. I can't imagine the challenges they're facing. Gettysburg, being, Civil War, memorabilia, Confederate flags everywhere. Like, wow, that's a tall order. But not that much different than what we're doing in York as well. I mean, you drive through the city and you see the political banter, you see Confederate flags. So we have a lot of work to do, but we're trying.
We're trying.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. So Anika, I'm going to ask you something a little different. What are the long-term consequences if we ignore DEI?
Well, so many things just came to my mind when you said that. I think we can talk from a very basic business level, right? As we look at recruitment and retention in our companies now, our organizations now, even pre-COVID, it was a challenge. Now that we're in a different phase with COVID, all organizations are faced with challenges with recruitment and retention. And, I was talking with someone earlier about, generation. When we talk about DEI, we haven't really talked about generations. This generation of workers, the new generation of workers, they're not going to sit and stay if we don't have organizations that have a culture that embraces and allows voices to be heard. And so from a very basic level, we as organizations are going to suffer. And then another thing I would say about that is, as I mentioned earlier, the diversity of perspectives is what propels us forward and makes us better. I'm typically the person in the meeting that wants to seek out that person who isn't speaking and say, what are your thoughts? Because 9 times out of 10, that person doesn't feel like they have a voice at the table. And so they sit there and no one talks to them. But then when they start talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, tell me more, right? And so we become stronger as organizations and as a community. And so the long-term consequence is status quo, which I think we would agree is not great. And so the long-term consequence for businesses and organizations is status quo. And we continue to see, I think you used the word disparities earlier, disparities. From a health perspective, we see that over and over and over again. And we know that, and there have been studies, that when patients see providers who look like them, they engage more deeply in their health care. Long-term consequence, people find out later in their journey that they have, terminal illnesses. So I could go on and on with this question, I'll stop here. But we see, we have to have representation.
Okay, Kim or Amy, did you want to add on?
Yeah,
to that?
I'd like to provide just a couple of stats here, because everything that you said, Anika, is right on, right? Recognizing that the projected growth among Asian, Hispanic, and multiracial groups, traditional minority groups, will hit majority status by 2044, right? So we as a country is just becoming more and more diverse. If you're not attracting, diverse team members, that's not a focus, then you're really recruiting from a smaller pool of candidates. And everybody knows about the Great Resignation. Every single person, has the ability and opportunity to thrive. So if you do not, once again, the consequences that you won't have great workers. And, yes, we've talked about race, but what about able-bodied individuals, right? We've recently began partnering with Penmar, to be able to partner and identify individuals that can come into our organization once again and have very meaningful careers. It's a two-way street for that. And then, once again, those organizations who exhibit gender and ethnic diversity are 15 to 35% more profitable than those that do not. One thing that I, talk, and I've said this many times, is, as you're recruiting and you're thinking about bringing folks into your organization is, well, are they the right fit? Do they fit? Do they fit? Do they fit? And I try to coach our folks. I say, how about thinking about, do they add? Do they add something, right? Do they add a different perspective? Do they add? I always say, I'm very much a rule follower box. I need folks who think outside the box, who are going to challenge me, that are going to give me something different to think about. So what can you add? What can you add? So without, really focusing on DEI, you're really going to lose out as an organization. You're not going to be able to perform or compete, or not compete well in an ever-growing competitive market. And I don't care what job market you're in. You need, diversity is critical.
Absolutely. Amy, did you have something to add? Because if not, I have another question.
Since Kim is bringing up stats, I also wrote a stat down. But diversity is so important, and if we don't acknowledge, as you said, and I think that is the hesitance of white people, because when diversity is present, it feels like oppression sometimes because they've been the default. And I said, we have been the default. I don't want to other myself because when we don't embrace DEI, we continue to other. I was reading a Washington Post article, and it was from 2014, so it's a little dated, but it said that 3/4 of white people have 0 non-white friends. That's not going to be sustainable in the future, with so much diversity. And it's important that we embrace that. And if we don't embrace it, what exactly is it that we're embracing? It sounds like white supremacy, that we're perpetuating racism and oppression. And as Kim mentioned, what happened in Buffalo this weekend, we see some progress, and then there's always regress. We see progress with Vice President Kamala Harris. We see progress with Supreme Justice Ketanji Jackson Brown. And with the new, her name is Corinne Jean-Pierre.
Press secretary.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is she? She's the
Part of the LGBT. Oh, she's a press secretary.
press secretary. Yes. So we see progress, and then we have incidents like this. So there's regress, and we need to come up with solutions to that. And embracing DEI is definitely a step in the right direction. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. So we're going to get into specifics. What are some specific ways that you've advocated for change and the successes and challenges you've faced? We're going to start with Amy and then work our way down.
Okay. What I've done, and especially since the pandemic started, just getting on every Zoom, I've been able to join trainings all over the world and doing amazing things. I took a critical race theory summer course with the Kimberly Crenshaw, and I say that with so much pride. It was amazing. But I'm also trying to use my platform as a professor. So rather than just teaching from the text, we are looking at implicit bias, and I assign an implicit bias assignment to all of my students. I would love to do it with my colleagues at work at both places as well, because I think that's where you need to start. You need to start with interrogating yourself and your thoughts and where those thoughts are coming from. And a lot of times those unconscious thoughts are not our fault. The agents of socialization, friends, peers, family, I can think of the most cringy things, people around me have said. And not addressing those things. So using your platform to educate others and make them aware. I still get pushback from some of my students, but I feel like the majority are listening and actually care and want to make a difference.
That's awesome. And yeah, we all have implicit bias, and I think that's important for everyone to remember and to know. Some people don't like hearing that, but it's like, yeah, we all do. So no
Right.
one's special.
A lot of the essays that I assigned, it starts out with, first of all, let me say that I'm not a racist. I'm like, sir, I am not trying to weed out the racist. I'm not reporting you to anyone. I want you to interrogate your own thoughts. And that's an important first step. So absolutely, yes, we all have bias because we all are living in society and have all kinds of influences. Media, political, religion, our families, it's beyond our control. But once you identify it, you have to challenge it. It's your moral obligation.
Okay. Anika, I kind of feel like you've answered this a little bit. So if you want to skip it, we can go to Kim.
I'll add a little more.
Okay.
One of the things that I find is so strong with DEI is asking questions. And so sometimes, when we sit here and talk about DEI, it seems so big and insurmountable. But as I mentioned earlier, we have our personal and our collective journeys. And so really challenging yourself when you're faced with maybe a longtime friend who makes a comment that you're like, ooh. Ask a question. Maybe you don't challenge it, but ask a follow-up question to say, well, why would you say that? What makes you think that? And so you would be amazed the conversations that come out of that simple question. And for some people, they just clam up and but even to have someone recognize and take a moment that, why did I say that? Most people will pause and say, well, I don't know. Or, this was informed by such and such. And that creates a space to step into to say, well, think about this other perspective. And so in terms of advocating for change, I have seen success in asking the questions because these conversations can get very contentious very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so we have to engage them with I've heard the term courageous curiosity, to really seek to understand why someone would say something. And Amy has referenced, we have all these influences around us. So someone might just be repeating what they've heard their whole life, in Kim's experience. So ask the question. That might be the first and only time that person is asked that question and their perspective's challenged.
And Kim.
Gosh, so Anika, I like how you talk about, your personal journey and collective journey. And I would say that, as an individual, I've prided myself as being someone that folks could come to and have those difficult conversations with. And it may be about the Black race. I've prided myself in being someone who, I'm all about relationship building. And relationship building in the sense that if I happen to step on somebody's toes or they happen to step on mine, that we can have a really good conversation about why that has occurred. And, recently within our organization, I advocated for us to have DEI as part of onboarding for every single new employee. But first I said, we got to really level set. Kind of create it for everybody. So initially it was every single, all 20,000 employees received, what is DEI at Wellspan? And we introduced the concept of unconscious bias, and really trying to disarm this thing of it can be negative if you allow it to be, but recognizing it, owning it, being able to get cues within yourself, so talk about that. I also, again, use my platform to be really transparent and call people on the carpet if I need to do that respectfully. But once again, being able to be someone that they can come and talk to if they have an issue or a concern. And I can tell you, every time I get an email from someone that says, you said that I can come and talk to you about X, Y, and Z. And I personally make sure I respond to each and every one of those emails to acknowledge that I meant it. And therefore, my brand is I am who I say I am, and that they can count on that. From a organizational standpoint, once again, I've stood in a room with our board and said, I'm used to being the only person of color here, and we need to change that. And, my board accepting those words and saying, we get that. And so having the professional courage to sometimes stick my neck out for the greater good for our organization is one way that I've done that personally. And then from a community standpoint, of course, it's just, belonging with organizations. I see one of my colleagues, Nicole Schaefer here from Confronting Racism Coalition, and Nicole is definitely a warrior in this space. And this is an organization that really is working to confront racism and within our York County community, and be an organization that steps up and speaks out when things don't align with the community that we all want to be able to live and thrive in. So I think it's not only my personal commitment, from, the first time I was working at a practice and was called the N-word by a patient, to, where I am today, being in a role that really enables me to use my voice for something that, like I said, is bigger than me. And I remember meeting with our HR team one day and saying, how I feel privileged for the fact that I have a platform. I feel very comfortable speaking my truth. I don't have to cover when I come to work. I am who I am. And I remember a team member of color coming in saying, but I don't feel what you feel. Mm-hmm. And, then it becomes the mission of, okay, so you don't feel that. So what do we need to do to create in our teams and our environments that you do feel exactly what I'm feeling? So it's, and we're trying. I'm not saying we have it all right, because I don't want to give the impression that we as an organization or that I have it figured out. But I believe that once again we're trying, just like everyone else, to hold each other and one another accountable. But being silent isn't an option.
Accountability is a great word. I have tons more questions, but we're going to turn it over to the audience. Hopefully some of you out there have a question. And also in our virtual chat room, do we have any questions there as well? If you have a question, raise your hand. No? No virtual questions?
Right here, Elle.
Oh, Tanisha. I'm sorry.
Hi, everyone. My question is going to be for Ms. Kim and Ms. Amy and you as well, Nika. In your journey, and thank you so much for including us in your journey and sharing your journey with us, something that has stuck with me is what Ms. Alarza shared with us, and that is that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is a spectrum. Mm-hmm. It's a spectrum, so we're all going to be in a different place. For me, I would like to know, how do you handle pushback from your students or from the board when you do speak up or when you do identify an adverse situation or climate or disparity? How do you handle that pushback, and how do you bounce back?
Sure. With my students, it usually doesn't come from them saying, I don't want to talk about this. It's usually a total avoidance of me. Or it'll come across on my course observation at the end of the semester. So I always start my semester, explaining what we're going to be doing and that we're going to do an implicit bias assignment. And I say, I do get a lot of pushback. Often these are the reasons that I'm getting this pushback. this work is messy and uncomfortable. You just have to accept it. I'm like, just feel your feelings, and if you have a difference of opinion or you think I'm doing, something wrong, or you want to talk to me, I'm always open for my office hours. I find that email is less confrontational, so I get emails at like 11 at night on a Friday, like, Professor B, I've been thinking about this thing that you said, and I'm like, it's Friday night. What are you doing? But I'm so excited that they're engaged in the work, and I'll have the conversation as soon as I read the email. I find that that's working a lot. What I did find previously, and I'm working on myself, is I find myself in echo chambers with people who are very like thinking. As part of the Confronting Racism Coalition, we go in there and we're all, so emphatic and enthusiastic to get involved in this work. But what I find is I need to talk to people who aren't at that level yet. Those are not necessarily the people we want to have those conversations with. But those are the people that we should be talking to and getting to the heart of the matter and the reasons behind those feelings and trying to find a common ground and working on ourselves. Yes, thank you for your question.
I would say I had shared, my approach of asking questions. When there's pushback, you can usually sense there's an undertone. Usually the pushback is a symptom of something deeper. And so really asking the questions, the 5 whys are a great strategy. Well, why do you think that? Well, why is that? Because I'm seeking to learn too, because ultimately I want us to get to a place where we can move forward together. So with pushback, asking questions is huge in my experience. And in terms of bouncing back, groups of like-minded people are a great space to bounce back, because in this work, you have days where you're like, oh my gosh, like, are we getting anywhere, right? You might have an encounter and you're like, really, that's what we're doing right now? But then when you enter into a space with like-minded people, it's like, oh yeah, that's why we're doing this. This matters. And so to bounce back, I find a lot of rejuvenation with those people like Kim and Amy and Nicole and others in this room that are at this work on an ongoing basis and having those spaces to say, yes, it's important. And even though today might not have felt like I moved the needle, I probably did yesterday, and I probably will tomorrow, We're not, it is a journey, it is a spectrum, and just like life, you have those days where it's just great, and you're firing on all cylinders, and then there's days that you're like, I could have handled that differently, maybe. Mm-hmm. And, we just have to learn from that ourselves.
Anika, I don't have much to add to you and Amy's because I think they were both, great responses. And I would say also, Tanisha, is that sometimes all of this is really great advice. I think having those conversations, once again, I think about, those relationships, having conversations, getting an understanding, learning more about this person. But, when you think about emotional intelligence, the reality is that, you have no control over this other individual. And there will be times where that opposition, that person isn't going to be able to see things through your lens. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And no matter how many conversations you have, you may not be able to convert everybody over just to having that open mindset. But being respectful to the fact that, we'll just have to agree to disagree, and on a particular topic. But being able to engage in those conversations and at least have a meaningful conversation, as I can tell you, there's not been one that, there's been some that we've decided to disagree, but there has been a respect at the end of the conversation that we still may not see eye to eye, but I respect their position, and all I ask is that they respect mine.
Thank you, ladies. I would say, I know you didn't ask me, but I've been in that position on my board at the Realtors Association, being the only non-white person on the board, which was maybe a couple years ago. And I was that person that said, hey, I'm the only one in this room that looks like me. can we do something about that? And I got some pushback, and I think the main thing was that people felt I was saying something negative about them because we have to pick our replacement. So if you're picking a replacement who looks like you, why are you not looking outside of that box and saying, okay, let me go outside of my circle and choose someone else? So I just took a deep breath, reflected on, it's not taking it personally because sometimes people feel attacked even though you're not attacking them. And then I just kept talking. And now I'm no longer the only non-white person on my board, but it's because I've, said, hey, I need you to join me here because I don't feel like my voice is being heard. So it's just keep talking, keep speaking up, and know that someone else will say, hey, she's got a point, and maybe we should do something different. So we do have time for one more question. Yes.
This question came from the chat. What are some ways for employers to proactively reach out job candidates from underrepresented communities?
Ooh, that's a good one. Who wants to take that one on?
I was thinking about, what we've done specifically at Wellspan, and we developed, relationships with some local organizations. I would say Crispus Attucks was definitely one that, rest in peace, Mr. Mike Jefferson. He was definitely a collaborative, a partner for us at any time that we had an opening. And Lord knows we have over 2,000 openings right now. So we would, ensure that that information was readily available. We're actually working directly with the movement right now to help us identify, qualified candidates for our positions. So I think it's, identifying local organizations that specifically connect with, underserved or underrepresented communities and build those relationships so that as you have openings, that you're able to quickly, reach out and make them aware. I mean, CRC actually is another organization that I would never give them all 2,000, but, if there was something that we were really looking for, we are more than willing to, post positions, which we do, and send out to the group to highlight those opportunities.
Yes, and reaching out to existing employees who represent those communities that you want to see represented more. I've personally had conversations with staff members in our organization and just asked them, where can we reach, these pockets of the community? And I've gotten a lot of insight. And I'm like, I would have never thought of that. That's brilliant. And they're simple things, different publications, different locations, and recognizing that I believe, and I don't want to step too far into the HR realm, Kim, but I believe, it's easy to post on Indeed. It's easy to post on our website. But in some communities, a flyer in the church is what they respond to, or a flyer in the corner store is what they respond to, or a weekly publication focused on that community is what they really turn to. And so recognizing that we have a lot of resources within our organizations already if we have diversity, which most organizations have some level of diversity. Come on. So think about the people that we already have and asking them that simple question, where do you get your information? And that'll open up a lot of opportunities.
Awesome. All right. Well, if that's it, I want to thank Kim, Anika, and Amy for sharing your perspectives and your words of inspiration this morning. A round of applause for our panelists, please. And you are released from the table if you want to return. Although I know we want to continue because this is just great discussion. We just have a few announcements to wrap up today. Our next event is scheduled for August 18th and will be an Inspiring Women Luncheon featuring Mainika Ojo. You can register on the Women United webpage. And we have a raffle from Wellspan to give away. So let's see. And I know I'm not supposed to pull my name. Jody Crow. Jody, all right. And if you've been to our breakfast before, I'm sure you know the centerpieces are also a giveaway. They were provided by our partner agency, Program Able Services. So you can fight amongst yourselves as to who's going to get that. So figure out who drove the farthest this morning, and that person can get the centerpiece. That's going to be a fun conversation. So thank you again to our sponsors this morning, to our Women United Steering Committee for helping pull this together, and to each of you for sharing your morning with us. You can stay connected with Women United and get all the updates on upcoming events through the United Way of York County Facebook page and our regular emails. And if you're not receiving those, talk to Nora Rotz. And thank you for all you're doing in our community, and have a great morning.